Hello students and welcome to this explanation on the new or the revised conceptual framework. And this is quite an interesting question relating to restoration cost of land. Let's read together. Bigm Pty Limited is a mining company with a 31st December financial year end. Bigm came across an opportunity to lease land in Saudi Arabia in order to mine diamonds. The terms of the lease stipulated that the restoration of land will have to take place at the end of the lease term and that the lease agreement will only be effective once the condition has been accepted. Bigm agreed to the terms and the lease commenced on 1 July 2016 for a period of 3 years, at which point the restoration of the land will take place. On 1 July, Bigm actively started mining. Bigm consulted with some experts in both Saudi Arabia as well as South Africa to determine what the future environmental cost regarding the restoration would account to. The experts were concerned about fluctuations in foreign currency as well as economic circumstances in Saudi Arabia, which would directly influence the cost associated with restoring the land. The cost of the labor is also continuously increasing, sometimes without prior warning due to strike actions and protest demands, which also influences the cost of restoration. The experts therefore used their judgment and estimated that the future restoration cost would be 300,000 Rand. The report, however, clearly indicated that there are many unforeseen factors that could potentially influence the amount in the future. The future cost was discounted with a pre-tax rate of 12% to a present value of 213,534 Rand. You may assume that this rate is appropriate. The company applies IFRS and SMEs. Right, so in A, they ask you to discuss in terms of the framework whether this rehabilitation cost should be recognized as a liability in the financial statements of Bigm as at 31st December 2016. If you include that it will not be recognized, you do not need to discuss the correct treatment. All right, so let's see. I am going to open a spreadsheet and then I just want to increase the size so that you can clearly see. So I've set up a block here with the definition and the interpretation of the definition, and then of course we must also do the recognition criteria. So in discussion questions like this, you will also always discuss the definition first, and thereafter you will discuss the specifics around the recognition criteria. So if we look at the new definition of a liability, it is said that it is a present obligation. All right, I'm just going to leave a few lines open so that I can write the interpretation. The second part says to transfer economic benefits. And the last part says as a result of past events. Right, so let's see how we can apply this to the current circumstances for Bigm. So the first thing we need to write down under the interpretation is, what does the word present obligation mean? So present obligation is a duty that or a responsibility that the entity cannot avoid. So I'm going to start with that. A present obligation is a responsibility that the entity cannot avoid. So there I know I've already scored a mark because I've demonstrated an understanding of terminology. Now we need to go and argue whether there is a present obligation in order to restore the land that they use in their mining. So I am going to say yes, that an obligation in accordance with this the scenario, a present obligation exists. Why? As there is a legal obligation to restore the land after 3 years, and this legal obligation was brought about by what? Was brought about by accepting the terms of the contract and most probably signing the contract, because you cannot start to mine if the contract was not accepted and signed. So yes, there is a present obligation. Why? Because there is a legal obligation to restore the land after 3 years. What brought the legal obligation into existence? The fact that Bigm accepted the terms of the contract and signed a contract and then also started mining. Then to transfer economic benefits, again, I'm going to start with an interpretation. So here I'm just going to put this one in a block so that you can see those go together. Right, so a transfer of economic benefits. So economic benefits refer to the transfer of assets, right? And here we ask, will there be a transfer of economic benefits? Yes, the cost of restoration of land represents the transfer of economic benefits, and we say it is most probably in the form of cash. So yes, if there is a obligation to transfer an asset. What type of asset? A current asset in the form of cash. Why do we transfer it? Because there is a cost associated with the restoration of the land. Right, then they ask, as a result of past events, what would the past events be? The past events would refer to accepting the conditions of the contract, signing of the contract, and also the commencement of mining on the same day. Right, if I look at this now, I am going to argue that indeed this is a liability. So I'm going to say my conclusion is restoration cost of land complies with the definition of a liability. Then we need to move on to the second part in answering a question such as this, and that is that we need to go and consider the recognition criteria. Right, and in the recognition criteria, there are two elements that we need to look at. The first one is relevance. And again, I am going to need an interpretation. Right, so relevance, what does relevance mean? It means that we need to go and determine whether there is some uncertainty whether this element exists and whether there is a probable transfer of economic benefits. So I'm going to say here, the transfer of economic benefits is probable as land will be basically affected by mining activities and require restoration. Therefore, we can say that the existence of the liability is not uncertain, because we know we're going to mine there. Once you mine, you cause damage. When you cause damage, you need to restore it because you've signed a contract to say that you will do that. So the transfer of economic benefits is probable as the land will be affected by mining activities and require restoration at a cost in the future. Right, then the second recognition criteria is that we need to go and consider the faithful representation. Here we need to go and determine the measurement. And that is where the big problem comes in this question. And I am going to indicate here that measurement of the future restoration cost is highly uncertain. Why do we say that it's highly uncertain? Well, they do name a number of problems in the question. So they talk about how the experts used their judgment, but that costs can change quickly, that labor costs are inconsistent. So costs can change quickly. Due to economic circumstances. Also, there is labor cost. Due to strikes. And the experts made clear. Explicitly indicated. I just want to scroll upwards. The experts explicitly indicated that their estimate is not reliable. So therefore, the estimate that they have provided is and I will just state the amount. The estimate provided was a present value of how much again? A present value of this amount, 213,545. Is it 5? Let's just check 5. Yeah, 534. At a rate percent. Right, so that is then the criteria, the recognition criteria that we need to look at. And then, of course, I need to go and write a conclusion for this part as well. So in my conclusion, I'm going to say I will say that it does not meet the restoration cost, does not meet the recognition criteria, of a liability. So My overall conclusion will then be the overall conclusion is that we cannot, Bigm cannot recognize a liability because the measurement is too uncertain under current conditions. All right, so if it does not meet one of the criteria, so one of the elements within the definition will not be met, or one of the recognition criteria are not met, then it is not that element. So even if there's just one little item that will not be met, it should be clearly said that this is not that element. So in this instance, it is not a liability because we only have an estimate in terms of a future value of 300,000 discounted at 12% to a 213,000 and some odd rands. However, the experts say that they don't believe that this estimate is a true reflection. There's too many elements that constantly change. So there's no measurement, I want to say security, and therefore we can argue that this will not be a liability. All right, so this is an answer that you should have written for a total of, I think, 7 marks, of which 1 mark is for presentation, and that means to use this appropriate layout to show on one side what the theory states and to do your interpretation on the other side. I hope that you have enjoyed this video and this explanation, and then I will also be recording another question in terms of an asset, so be sure to watch that video as well. Thank you so much and keep well.